Welcome everybody to the January 11th, 2022 meeting of the Carpinteria Unified School District. Andy, can I get a roll call, please?
Aaron.
Here.
Jamie.
Here.
Sally.
Here.
Jamie.
Here.
And I'm here.
Okay. Everybody please rise for the flag salute. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, moving along, we'll go to item B2, approval of the minutes from our December 14th board meeting. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item B3 is approval of the agenda and consent agenda. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
And this is roll call, Andy?
Aaron.
Aye.
Jamie.
Aye.
Sally.
Aye.
Jamie.
Aye.
And I'm aye.
Right. We'll move right to D1, our student representative report.
Alrighty. So, second semester began on January 6th amid the new worries over the Omicron variant. Teachers have been working to address any concerns students have, making sure that lessons are posted on Google Classroom and accessible online. COVID-19 testing continues to be part of all indoor sports, and Mr. Barrera administers all tests twice a week. ASB continues to plan student activities such as Prom and Ultimate Warrior that are at the top of the list right now, and being flexible with those events. Finally, tomorrow each student will receive one COVID-19 test kit in their English class. These tests are sent to each school by the state, and students will receive instructions on how to use them via Parent Square.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Natalia.
Diana?
Thank you, Jamie. Yes. So I begin with appreciation, and January is time to acknowledge the school board and its role in supporting student achievement during School Board Recognition Month. We are proud to join more than 1,000 local educational agencies in the state in recognizing the contributions of our board members who, in the time of unprecedented challenges in nearly every sector of life, have worked tirelessly to help our district establish new ways of ensuring students continue to learn. Board members are our elected representatives and a vital link between the school district and the community. The board sets the foundation and vision for the district, directs resources where they are most needed, and ensures accountability to the community by monitoring progress toward goals. Their end goal, of course, is to support and elevate student achievement. Please join me in saluting our hardworking board members, Jamie Bray, Jamie Diamond, Sally Green, Andy Schaefer, and Aaron Smith. Thank you. The next item is our safe return to second semester. We welcomed students and staff last week after the holiday break, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that staff and students are safe and healthy despite the highly contagious Omicron and Delta COVID-19 variants. We continue to implement health and safety protocols, including school cleanliness, masking, testing, quarantining, and supporting vaccines. We encourage staff and families to do all they can to be safe as well. Regarding vaccinations, all students ages 5 and older are advised to get their vaccinations, and students 16 and older should also get their booster. Vaccinations are available at local pharmacies and Santa Barbara County Public Health. Albertsons hosted a vaccine clinic on Friday, January 7th, 4 to 7 at the middle school. There will be another vaccine clinic February 7th, and then, February 4th, and then March 4th. We will also include booster shots for students at that time. The next item is testing, and through CDPH, the Santa Barbara County Education Office received a shipment of at-home rapid test kits for distribution to all county TK-12 public school districts. Today and tomorrow, each CUSD student received or will receive a free test kit at their school site. Directions for using the test kit have been posted on Parent Square. Additionally, CUSD participates in the Aptitude COVID-19 testing program, and students and employees are able to receive a free test at Earl Warren Showgrounds in Santa Barbara. And then lastly, we continue our weekly testing of any CUSD employee at the district office. It is recommended that all students and staff wear surgical masks at all times when indoors. CUSD is providing surgical masks for staff and has a limited supply for students, and the state will be distributing N95 masks to staff in the next week. Quarantining. The CDPH has updated their protocols for students for isolation and quarantining, and that's been posted on our website. Cal OSHA is also updating their protocols for isolation and quarantine for employees. Monitoring symptoms. We encourage parents to check students for symptoms before coming to school. And please stay home if sick with fever or chills, cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea, and please test for COVID and follow isolation protocols. We appreciate parent support in keeping our staff and students healthy and safe as we return to school. The next item refers to additional support at the middle school and high school. The safety and security of students, academic progress, mental health, and emotional well-being are the most important priorities for our schools. This year at CHS, we have added an additional assistant principal, counselor, mental health therapist, and security personnel. We have also hired additional teachers and instructional assistants to support special education students and those students who are failing English or math. At CMS, we have added additional special education and reading intervention teachers, instructional assistants, security personnel, and an office coordinator. The next item we have is congratulations. CHS student Itzi Alvarado is the winner of the Carpinteria Library's new card contest with her monarch butterfly and pink flower design. ESSER 3 expenditure plan. The ESSER 3 plan details how we'll spend ESSER 3 one-time funds to address the impact of COVID-19 on our district before September 2024. The Santa Barbara County Office is required to review and approve each district's plan, and in December, the CUSD ESSER 3 plan was approved, and it is posted on the district's website at www.cusd.net. Elementary students are looking forward to once again participating in the curriculum field trips for each grade level. At TK and kindergarten, students will enjoy the Santa Barbara Zoo. At grade 1, they will travel to the Sea Center. Grade 2, the Moxie Museum. Grade 3, Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. Grade 4, Santa Cruz Island. And grade 5, students will enjoy the Catalina Island Marine Institute. And the last item is an update on Measure U projects. To prepare for the imminent winter storm and rainfall, a stormwater management system was put into place at Summerlin to ensure that all water runoff remained on the construction site. The early rains confirmed the water containment. The site was covered in plastic to protect excavated footings for the remainder of winter break. With blue skies, the project is back in production. The CHS administration building was completely sheeted and covered in plastic prior to rainfall, and work crews, including plumbing, electrical, and HVAC, continue to work inside through the remainder of winter break. The roof plastic has now been removed and roofing has begun. Both projects are on track with a minimal delay due to bad weather. The Measure U team will be meeting this week to finalize the plans for the summer modernization projects and prepare the bids for Catalina and Maine schools. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Does anybody have any questions for our superintendent? All right, we'll move right along. We have Ms. O'Shea here for a presentation of the Carpinteria Middle School Safety Survey results from 2021.
Hi, good evening, school board members. And should I take this off up here or leave it on? I'll leave it on. And I think you all have a copy in front of you. So this was put out whenever I put a parent square message out to Carpinteria Middle School. It goes to 1,007 recipients, and out of that we had 50 parent participants respond, and we had 378 students respond. So only about 5% of the parents that received the message. So if you go to the first page, students feel safe on school grounds. On all of these, on all of these, the student will be on the left and the parent is on the right. And I apologize that the answers populated, or the responses populated differently. But the parents, 50% agreed. About 75% of students agreed that they felt safe on campus. The next one is vaping. We've had very little issues with vaping this year, but the perception by most students is that they don't know or it's not happening. Alcohol and drugs on campus. So we did not ask parents this, but students, about 83% said it was not happening, and a few weren't sure. Cyberbullying. So the students, there was about 12% that said they were being cyberbullied, and the parents said about 10%. So the way we will respond, and we have responded, is by teaching digital citizenship to our students during advisory class. So I'm often sharing videos that are really powerful with teachers to share with their advisory classes. There were the classes that I walked in today, teachers were showing the videos to the students, and they're making an impact on them. And then also, of course, constantly teaching the CMS expectations. I found this next one regarding supervision really interesting, because the perception of students being supervised is much higher than the parent perception. So the way we'll respond, increase staff supervision, so having our teachers and our instructional assistants monitor during transition time. And then we also interviewed yesterday for an additional campus security supervisor specialist. Do students know how to report a concern? As you know, on the school website, students are in the drop down, there's a report a concern document. We go over that with the students throughout the year and remind them of how they can anonymously report issues. And the students agreed that they know, 87% said they knew where to find that, and we will continue reminding them of that. As you know, the CMS expectations, we expect the students to be respectful, responsible, safe, and positive contributors. Whenever they don't behave as expected, we're able to bring them back to one of those. And so the parents also had a perception of almost 80% that students did understand those expectations. So some of the parent comments were more supervision, clearly communicate consequences. Parents need to monitor student phones since outside issues spill over into school. And so the one thing I want to talk about here, you guys approved last year for the installation of the security cameras around campus. And originally when those were installed, I thought, well, if there's some graffiti overnight, we can go see who did it. I didn't really view those cameras as like something we could actively use throughout the day in monitoring student behavior. So we're really doing that. Our office manager is on them constantly during lunch live, and she can say to us, there's some students over here, there's someone, you know, doing whatever. And so that's really helped. We had a student, I was at a middle school before where popping cartons was really, really common. And if it ever happens at CMS, I'll say to the student, that may happen in elementary school, but at the middle school, we don't pop cartons. So it's a rare thing, and it's super startling because it's like a gunshot. So it happened right before winter break, and when I went right to where it happened.
Stepping on like a milk carton?
Stomping on a milk carton.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so when I went over there, there were two students that I wouldn't suspect would have done that. When I went and watched the footage, it was a student who did it and slipped right out, just real calmly right out, and I was like, oh, we got him. So I'm like, here's the footage, you stomped that carton, you're gonna have to serve a campus beautification and a lunch refocus. And so just using the cameras to really stay up on student behavior, hold students accountable who act unsafely by keeping them in during lunch. Again, I mentioned the office camera, the office manager using the cameras to monitor students during nutrition, passing period, and lunch. We had a student last week report that something, a bottle that was being used in a lab experiment was found in the bathroom. And we went and looked at the footage, and it was that very student that had taken it. So it's been really helpful. Suspend students who behave unsafely, continue to teach CMS expectations, remind students where to report a concern, increase staff supervision, and campus supervisor.
Excuse me, Lisa, could you share about the refocusing at lunch? You mentioned it, but you didn't explain it. Your refocus groups.
Right. So we have teachers that are serving during their lunch for students that have either had some sort of behavior issue in the classroom or any time the lunch before, any sort of issue. We bring them in there. They fill out a refocus form. The idea is to replace the behavior with the positive behavior we want to see. We also have our new counselor that we're using in there to support, you know, the redirecting of the student behavior. And so far, it's been very successful. And I just wanted to share the discipline matrix. This just talks about the behavior, the example of behavior, and consequences, and who is responsible. So one of the things, because we know that teachers are more successful when they have positive relationships with their students. Many of our students have adverse childhood experiences at home, which could be anything from having a parent who may abuse drugs or alcohol, or maybe a parent yells at a student. And adverse childhood experiences can actually be healed if students can have a very safe and consistent positive adult in their life. However, you know, PBIS, you teach students the expectations, but you also hold them accountable in a loving way, not a reactive way. But I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding that you don't hold students accountable for your behavior, and you do. You know, the students want the guardrails, they understand the consequences, and they respect that. So, and a lot of it, when involving some of the more minor behaviors, do fall on the responsibility of the teacher. And the teacher, let me go through the log. So the teachers have this discipline log. If you'll skip through some of those. And at the end of the matrix, we do say our mental health specialists and administrators are here to support with behaviors across any tier. If you need assistance, please let us know. But so if a student misbehaves in the classroom, the teachers will give the student a warning and meet with them. The second thing they will do, if it happens again, the vast majority will stop after step one. If it happens again, the teachers will assign a consequence and call home. If it happens a third time, again. And then after that point, it falls to the office. So, and that can often result maybe in like a period class suspension or something of that nature. So the next slide is discipline data from fall 2021 and 2018. So I find it really interesting. In 2018, we had more overall discipline infractions, and the vast majority of them, over half, were disruptive and defiant behaviors. If you'll look at that now, that's sort of changed. Like this year, we're having more cell phone violations. The other, if you see a large number in other, that's where we put if students repeatedly refused to wear a mask correctly. And then also you can see that physical injury and or fighting was up. So that's what is concerning us. And then the next page is a little bit harder to read, but these are just screenshots from Aries for suspendable behaviors. And what I tried to do on the page before was sort of summarize that. So if you look on the left, 10 and 11, disruptive behavior, that's where the 101 came from, those two numbers. And then in 2000, this year, we've had them, and again, these are just from the fall, we've had just more over, you know, a mixture of different behaviors.
Lisa?
And then a summary of suspensions, total suspensions. In 2018, there were 136 suspendable offenses. In 2021, 85. And some of this data was updated from a spreadsheet that we had that was a little bit more accurate. The number of students suspended was a little bit lower this year. However, the number of days of total number of days of suspension was a little bit higher this year. And then one thing that we're really proud of this year, this semester, the first semester at Carpinteria Middle School, 74% of our students, almost 3/4 of them, earned a 3.0 or higher this fall semester, and the school average GPA was a 3.27. So again, success begets success. I had a teacher tell me once that the F's would be motivating for students, and the research shows quite the opposite, that students, when they experience success, they gain confidence and self-efficacy and are able to become more successful. So,
Lisa, I wanted to ask how you're managing the cell phones. Do they keep them on them but cannot be shown, or do you have them in the beginning?
So we remind them when they enter, and I can usually see if it's in their pocket, to put away in their backpack. So they just keep them away throughout the day. Yeah, but they keep them on themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple quick questions, clarifying questions. So on the first page of the survey, you asked students, I feel safe before and after school when on school grounds. Was there a question of I feel safe during school?
That's a great question. I'm wondering if it doesn't look like it was cut off. Well, it does say when on school grounds. I thought that one had it in there because at the time when I created this, I didn't realize I would be putting them side by side.
Right.
Otherwise, I think I would have synced the questions a little more, carefully.
Okay. And then is drugs or alcohol on campus? I have seen students with drugs or alcohol at school. So a great amount said no, but there's 4.8% that said yes. And are you seeing that in your disciplinary actions, that like you're seeing this 4.8%, or is this going unseen by admin and teachers?
So we have, if there's ever any sort of smoke in the bathroom, we know right away, obviously. We have had an incident of marijuana this year that was dealt with. It was a suspension. And so yes, we have seen it, but it's been minor.
Okay.
We also, we know that students will let us know if someone has something, and so we'll search students. We have searched students and found vapes. a few times this year.
So I just want, my point is basically, so 4.8% of the students that responded said, yes, they have seen drugs and alcohol on campus. I want to make sure that you and teachers and staff are also seeing and dealing with that. It's not going unseen. It's seen by students,
I
but not
understand
by
what you're
admin. That's all
saying.
I'm asking. Okay.
Correct.
Is there cyberbullying? I have had mean things said to me or about me on social media. Was there a question asking, I have seen mean things about others? Like,
No.
it was just specific to the person? Okay.
Correct.
And then for supervision, so 66% of students believe they're well supervised. 34% disagree that they're well supervised. Like, that's a fairly large, like,
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a big number.
It is. Yeah.
So I think, the things that you've done to respond, definitely are great and in line with that. And I know parents already feel better about the steps that have been taken, at least from what I've heard. And I think you guys have been really responsive to what's going on and how to deal with the kids on campus, because it's a crazy time and kids are acting out and reacting to the things that have happened over the last couple years, and lack of boundaries and lack of consequences, and I think you guys are really stepping up to making it very clear what those boundaries are, what those consequences are, and it'll go a long ways as they move on from middle school to high school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Your question, Andy?
Questions?
Yeah, so, thank you, Lisa. I'm really, just kind of segueing off of that expectations, chart there. I'd really like to know or interview or have someone interview those parents who strongly disagree that expectations are not clearly defined, because I think that those parents are going to probably correlate with students that you may be having issues with, and because it's such a big disparity there. You have strongly agree and agree at 75, 78%, and I'm just, that's a big number. I mean, 6% of 50 is not a big number. I mean, what is that? Three. But so there's 3 parents who don't think, that took the time to respond to this survey, that really don't think their expectations are clear. And then with the vaping, I mean, I correlate the vaping with, kids that are vaping are generally going to be vaping more than just, cherry cola flavors. And so that's probably a strong correlation with that to drug and alcohol use. And there's a big disparity there too in the student response. And so are these all anonymous? These are the anonymous survey?
Yeah.
Parents too?
But I do know on the survey, I was one of the 50 that took it, there was the option for responses. Do you have any of those responses that kind of say why they strongly disagree? Was there anything along those lines that could give you
Nobody,
indication?
I don't recall that being a comment. And I know Diana is a collaborator on there. I could get you the comments if you'd like to read them in whole. I sort of summarized them at the end,
Yeah.
more supervision and things
Just
like
wonder
that.
if there's a common theme or.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think, we had a fight in the fall that involved several students, multiple students, and I think that in and of itself, it just was a freak thing with a student who'd just been at the school a very short time, who I didn't really even know because she came through the front gate and is no longer at the school. So I feel like we're back to where we know all of our students. When new students come in, we make sure we know them. We make sure they understand. We also really are making sure that students are really clear that we have a really large social emotional support staff to help with any conflict whatsoever. There's never a reason. We've had a lot of success with mediating with students, and we do that often. And additionally, when students return from suspension, if the suspension involved a conflict with a teacher. We had a student return today and had said some really disrespectful words to a teacher, and the student wasn't allowed back into class until we could meet with that teacher. And even in that, I ended up offering social emotional support for the student because he'd received that in the 6th grade, and he's an 8th grader, and he said, I think I would like that. So, even though we do the suspension, we still follow up with the restorative approach to sort of bring them back into the fold.
Yeah, and I do know this survey was taken at the height of the emotions surrounding that one fight. So,
right, and only
grain of
50
salt.
parents. So,
I guess I'm just so disappointed that only, I mean, I think it's safe to say 3 of the 50 are sitting up here right now that responded. And that's frustrating to have so many parents be so outraged and vocal on social media and fired up and talking around school and texts and this and that. And yet they were given the opportunity for their voices to be heard, and they didn't take that opportunity. And that's frustrating for you, I'm sure, and for us, because if this is how you feel, these surveys are so important for parents to fill out so we can figure out where the problems are. So that's really discouraging that only 50 people responded.
And I think the natural reaction in times like this, when there's a lot of uncertainty, is to blame. Blame the teachers, blame the principal, blame whoever. And I found the vast majority of parents are not that way. They're very, very supportive and recognize that, we have our work cut out for us and that we're, giving our best effort. So.
And with that, do you find that obviously coming after COVID and the kids were in school full time, and now that they've been back, 3.5 months now, do you feel like getting on the upswing now that you know all the kids and they're getting back in the groove of what their expectations are, how you sit in a classroom, that type of stuff? Is that getting better?
I'm really hopeful. The past 3 days or 4 days, we've had, quite a few students out. So it has felt very, very, very calm at CMS. But yesterday I was in all of the 8th grade science classes, so I spoke to all the 8th graders, and I was just really clear to them, like, you bring your A game every day, academically, behaviorally, respect, like that's all we're accepting. And they seem to respond. And with 8th graders, with promotion hanging over their heads, we have the attendance contracts out because we have so many students. I think it was like 38% that have of 8th graders that have 5 or fewer tardies, and that's a lot, and then 10 or fewer is the majority. It's like 70%. But we do have like a few students that have like 80 tardies and stuff, and so they have to earn those back if they want to do in promotion. They have to erase those tardies, and we're providing some ways for them to do that. But the only way we're going to allow that is if they stop being tardy. Our goal is to get them to class on time. So our tardies have gone way down since we've put those students on a contract. We started Saturday school and that sort of thing.
Great.
All the students know that the cameras are around campus too, so
they're getting the word
got an
out. When
extra
I bring
eye.
my phone up and I show them the snapshot, oh, it was you that took the bottle from the science class. Oh, yeah.
I'm
So
sure
word's
that would be a
getting
big
around.
deterrent if they all knew that
It
they
would.
got eyes in the sky.
I have mixed feelings about the cameras. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think I just think it conditions them to get used to the surveillance state, and I also, but I think my biggest problem is that it allows the staff to almost become lazy in their observational skills because they become reliant on the camera.
Yeah, I
And
don't think that's true. I don't feel that way. Like when I'm out there watching and supervising, like I'm not thinking, oh,
no,
I
I'm
don't
not.
have to
I'm not
look at 'em
speaking of
'cause-
you specifically.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the rest of the staff and teachers may be more reticent or less willing to actually be more, be really actively observing what's going on because they know that there's this camera that they can fall back on if something actually happens, and then they don't get to know the students as well and observe their behavior patterns, and I just think you lose connectedness to the population when you rely on this artificial, camera to actually be doing the work that you should be doing as a staff member.
I don't feel like our staff feels that way, and I think like I forget they're there until I'm like, oh, we could look at the cameras for that, So I don't know about that,
Right.
but
Well,
I
if
see
More
what
just
you're
like
saying.
an extra help, like when,
No, I
the
can-
office
no,
manager
I
would say,
think-
hey, you need to
yeah.
get somebody over here because.
Cameras are
there's
very
a-
useful for
yeah.
certain, I think after hours especially, they're great, but I think during the day, I just have mixed feelings. I mean, I'm not saying I totally disagree with them because they've helped you. but-
Well, and here's sort of a pushback on what you're saying. There were, at one end of the hall, I got teachers that are like out. In the other end, they're sort of, some will be still in the classroom dealing with students and they're late getting out for supervision. And that's where we'll have like more things torn down or from the bulletin boards and things like that. And so I went to the teacher and I said, the bell rang at 2:06 and you didn't come out your door until 2:10, and there were a lot of students outside your door. So I actually used the cameras to share with them, this is what's happening and this is where I need you to be.
All right.
So,
So the expectation is that they come out during passing period.
oh yeah.
Yes.
Because one of the PBIS expectations is you greet students by name, do a check-in with them, and
Thank you.
All right, so any other questions for Lisa? Cool, thank you very much for your
much.
presentation.
Thanks, Lisa.
thanks for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thanks for being here. All right, we are going to move along to our next presentation. Item D4. This is the transition from at-large elections to trustee area elections for the Carpinteria Unified School District Governing Board. We have a presentation by the National Demographics Corporation. I think we've had you before, but give us another background of why we're doing this.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
So good to be with you again. My name is Daniel Phillips, and I am a consultant with National Demographics Corporation. And I'm here today to help you along through the process of transitioning to by trustee area elections. And so I have a presentation, and it will be pretty similar to one I've already presented to you. It was back in August. I came to you and gave you an introduction. And so the law stipulates that there has to be the 4 public hearings when undergoing this process. And unfortunately, we cannot count as a public hearing my first presentation. So tonight will be considered the first of those 4 presentations. So just a little background on election systems. You are currently elected at large, which means voters throughout the district get an opportunity to elect all members of the board. There is a hybrid system called the from trustee area system, where a board member has to live in a certain area, but they can still be voted on by residents throughout the district. However, the California Voting Rights Act does not consider that to be sufficient. It basically is written in a way that it specifically encourages the third system, which is the by trustee area election system, whereby a trustee has to live in a certain area and they can only be voted on by residents of that area.
When you say encourage, do you mean encourage or do you mean require?
I will defer to your legal counsel on that, but I don't think there is a specific, like you must do this, but what the legislation has done is make it much more easy to be found liable for racially polarized voting. And so it's it's taken the Gingell's tests and reduced them so that it's much easier for plaintiffs to force jurisdictions into this election system. And so there have been cases where jurisdictions have resisted or fought attempts to switch to this third election system when they have been sued. But to this date, there has been no successful case of a jurisdiction successfully fighting such a lawsuit. There have been a lot of settlements for a lot of money, and you can see that there really is no other fiscally prudent option other than to go along with what the law is encouraging, which is to move to the by trustee area election system. There is only one case in Santa Monica where there is a chance that it could result in a different outcome, but that is currently at the California Supreme Court, and there is no indication as of yet that the Supreme Court will rule in Santa Monica's favor.
So, but we currently, in our district, we're at large for 4 members and then by trustee for already 1 area, correct?
Yes. So that would be considered a hybrid system.
So it's the hybrid between those 2.
Yeah, and only the pure system where it's 5 areas that are each where you have a trustee living in each, and they are only voted on by residents of that each area is considered legally safe. So, as I said, this is the schedule for what is transpiring. I came to you back in August and gave an informational item to discuss what the process would entail. And we also talked about the issue of the Summerlin trustee, and we believe that issue has now been resolved, but you can talk to your legal counsel more if you have any more questions about that. But assuming that issue is resolved, we're moving forward with the transition process where you have 4 required hearings. 2 hearings had to take place before any maps are presented. So these are to solicit input, educate on the process, and get some feedback from the board and members of the public about how they think the trustee area should be drawn. So tonight is the first of those hearings, and then the second will be in 2 weeks on the 25th. At that time, we will then release draft maps, and based on the input we get, and those will be posted on February 1st. They had to be posted 7 days prior to the first of the 2 post-draft hearings. So you have the 3rd and 4th public hearings are the ones where you actually can look at and consider the actual draft maps and if necessary, propose revisions to them. And so we'll have those on February 8th and 23rd. And then we're also planning on having the formal map adoption on February 23rd. There is language in the law about there being a map adoption hearing, but as far as we can tell, that can happen at the same meeting as the 4th and final public hearing on the maps. So we would have 2 hearings in 1 meeting on the 23rd of February. Any questions about the schedule? Okay. So what you see here are the rules and goals for drawing trustee areas. The rules are on the left-hand side under the red heading of federal laws, and the goals are under the gold heading of traditional principles. So everything under the gold heading is optional, and everything under the red heading is mandatory. And so the mandatory requirements are that the trustee areas be equal in population, and by population we mean all people counted by the census, including children and non-citizens. So they had to be equal. They don't have to be exactly equal, but there is a threshold at which you don't want to, there is a threshold at which they could become too imbalanced, and we want to stay under that threshold. Then there is the Federal Voting Rights Act to be mindful of. So you don't want to do anything that would dilute the voting influence of any racial or ethnic minority group. But on the flip side, you want to avoid what's called racial gerrymandering, where you make race or ethnicity the only or main consideration when drawing your trustee areas. So assuming that you these draft maps all satisfy the federal legal requirements, then everything on the right-hand side are optional considerations that we can take into account when drawing these areas, such as respecting communities of interest, which are socioeconomic areas that have some sort of common identity and sense of belonging and would benefit from being kept together in one trustee area. Compactness, which are just the shape of the areas, nothing too bizarrely shaped. Contiguity, just the fact that the areas would be one piece each, not disconnected pieces. Following visible natural or man-made boundaries like major roads, highways, rivers, creeks, etc. And this next bullet we refer to as respecting voters' choices and continuity in office. And the idea there is, to the extent practicable, if the district would want this as a consideration, doing our best to keep the incumbent trustees in separate trustee areas so that each has the opportunity to run for re-election, and you leave it to the voters to decide whether each of you has earned that opportunity. And lastly, if you anticipate any planned future growth, you can account for that by slightly underpopulating the area where that growth is expected, while not straying too far from the equal population guideline or requirement. So any questions about the criteria?
Good, thank you.
Okay. So this next slide presents a demographic summary of your district, and there's a lot of data here. So I won't dwell on it. I'll leave it to you to review on your own time the individual columns and fields. I just want to point out a few highlights, which are that all the data presented are the official and most current data available, and each of the 5 trustee areas must contain about 3,600 people. So we get that number by taking the total population that the census counted in 2020, which is 18,024. We also had to adjust that population for prisoners whose last known residential address was in your district. The state requires that we use that adjusted figure. So that adds 30 or so people. And so that 18,058 figure, we then divide by 5 to get to the ideal population value for each trustee area. You'll see under that the total population, which is all people counted by the census, and you see that when you break that down by racial or ethnic group, non-Hispanic whites are the bare majority of your district's population, and there is a sizable contingent of Hispanics, over 2/5 of the district's population. But then we want to hone in on a more narrow category, which is the citizen voting age population. And the reason we do this is because the courts have ruled that this is the most important consideration when it comes to satisfying the Federal Voting Rights Act, because you want to focus on those who actually have the ability to vote and enhance their opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So when looking at that group, it is 12,158. And you'll see that the racial ethnic breakdown is quite a bit different. It's 70% non-Hispanic white and only a quarter Hispanic, and smaller numbers of other groups. So given that Latinos are the largest minority group in your district, We want to be specifically mindful of where they are concentrated so that we avoid diluting their voting strength. And so you'll see in this map that the reds, oranges, and greens indicate higher percentages of Latinos of the citizen voting age population. And so you'll see that they are particularly concentrated in West Central Carpinteria in this vicinity, and also off Baylord Avenue. There are no significant concentrations of other protected classes or racial or ethnic minority groups. When it comes to, oh, did you have a question?
All right. On that map, there's this huge swath. Never mind. Wait. Yeah.
Bluffs?
That's the bluffs. You have a huge swath of green, but that's the bluffs area. Like, that's not, nobody.
Oh, it might be Conchaloma.
Mm.
Or part of it might be Conchaloma.
Is the green
lower-
highlighted area, is
Not
that
parts
what
of it,
we're looking at on these?
It's not Conchaloma.
But it's taking, it's capturing.
What is it catch?
It's capturing the
Like,
All the
what is it, right over
apartments
here?
down there.
by the entrance to Conchaloma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right here.
But it goes all the
Down
way
here,
down,
yeah.
but that goes all the way down
Well, but it's only, there's only population in that one
slit.
little part.
And they have it
It's right
highlighted.
here is where
Yeah.
all the people live.
It's right here, but they have this whole thing
Yeah, 'cause it's
showing
all one
as
block.
population. But
It's
there's
like-
nobody
it's
that
like
lives
tea
there.
time and City Hall.
Right.
So can you explain how these shapes, how these polygons are created?
Yeah, those are census blocks. So these are created by the Census Bureau, and that is the smallest unit at which they report data. So they don't report it household by household. They use blocks, which are often just city blocks, but when you get to more rural areas, they can get quite large.
So that green area that's in the southeast corner there along the coast.
Yeah, that's one big block.
Yeah, so they do that by population. Is that's it's
Yeah.
They usually use streets as boundaries. So some blocks can be unpopulated or just a few people. Other blocks can have hundreds of people.
What's the difference between the green and the
Yeah.
red and the orange?
Yeah, so green is 50 to
Nothing
65%.
What I'm saying.
Orange is 65 to 75%, and red is greater than 75%. So
Those the density
yeah,
of them.
those warmer colors are what you want to focus in on, especially the reds and oranges.
Okay.
So it can be a little visually deceiving, especially in those rural areas where the blocks are so big and they're often not very heavily populated. But I just want to point out that you really do have the highest concentration in this area here, West Central Carpinteria.
it's right there on the corner of Foothill and Linden.
If you want to consider communities of interest as a criterion, one of those optional considerations, one possible way of thinking about communities of interest could be where renters are concentrated, and they are particularly concentrated in Central Carpinteria near the waterfront. And in this map, the units are larger. They're what are called block groups. So they are, it's not block by block. The census doesn't report this type of data at that fine of a resolution, but you still get the sense, the general sense that they are concentrated. The freeway is right here, so it would be south of the freeway and on both sides of the railroad track. Another possible way of thinking about communities of interest would be where higher earners are concentrated. This is showing those who earn more than $75,000 a year. So the red and orange would indicate where you have higher earners, and so you see that they are concentrated in Northeast Carpinteria as well as the foothill areas. And one other possible way of thinking about communities or neighborhoods would be land use and where certain types of housing are concentrated. So in this map, lower density housing is indicated by the yellow color, and those are concentrated in Northern Carpinteria on that opposite side of the freeway, with medium density housing and commercial uses downtown and along the freeway. And one last one is the elementary school attendance areas. So this could or could not be considered a community of interest. And so one of those is Summerland Elementary. So everything west of this boundary is considered the Summerland attendance area. You have Aliso, which is Western Carpinteria, Toro Canyon, and outlying areas. And forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that one right, Canalino covers Eastern Carpinteria, so all of this area as well. So when it comes to school attendance areas, school boards differ on how they want to treat them. A lot of times school boards want to kind of intermingle them among the trustee areas so that they're kind of there's not what's called the balkanization, but there could be other times where they are real legitimate communities of interest. Perhaps in this case, Summerland would be considered one. So this is my final slide, just prompting questions. Which traditional principles would you like us to consider when drawing your district's trustee areas in addition to the federal requirements? So the federal requirements are given. I'm just asking about these on the right-hand side. Which of these should we consider when drawing your trustee areas? Maybe all of them, maybe just some of them. And lastly, which should we prioritize? So maybe there's quite a few principles that you want us to consider, but oftentimes the nature of this process, you have to make trade-offs. So it's helpful for us to know which are more important to prioritize. And finally, we have an interactive review map that is linked on this last slide. So all the images I showed are taken from that. So feel free to go there and explore on your own, but eventually the draft maps will be posted on the interactive review map as well. So I know that was a lot of information, so thank you for your attention and happy to take your questions.
I have a question.
Go for it, Andy.
So each of these trustee areas, if we divide them equally, would be about 2,800 roughly, if we're dividing it by the voting population, or do we divide it by the total population?
You divide it by the total population.
Okay, so about 3,600.
Yeah.
Okay, so on these interactive maps, is there any way to determine if we create, boundaries, what the population of that zone would be? Is that in the ability of your software?
So there are mapping tools that do that, but they're more advanced and more expensive. So they would require, if you were interested in them, it would require a different an additional fee, and it would but it allows people to actually see the number of people who are in an area as you create it. So well,
don't we have to do that eventually?
Yeah, how do we figure out otherwise?
That is something that we, the demographers, have the ability to do in-house, and so we will be doing that on our own and drawing the proposed draft plans and presenting those to you.
Okay.
Oh, so the expectation is that we don't come up with ideas. We'd basically just give you parameters, and then you come up with proposed maps.
You may give me parameters. You may give me ideas, like for example, you really want Summerlin to be its own trustee area, and then I take that and work with the population data to try to achieve that the best I can, and so I'm happy to take any input.
And my question is, once these are drawn and populations change, can we change them again?
Yeah, in fact, that is something that is legally required every 10 years after each census. So this is what's called districting, and then every 10 years will be a redistricting where you'll do this again. But the nice thing is I believe there's only one hearing requirement for redistricting, so you won't have to do the full experience that you're doing now. It will most likely be just kind of a checkup and some slight changes to make sure the areas are still population balanced.
So I have a question that's maybe unrelated to this, but I've noticed on the California redistricting maps that they're coming up with for congressional districts that those don't follow the guidelines that you've set forth here, in that they're very irregularly shaped and they don't necessarily follow geographic boundaries or take into consideration the voters' continuity of service and things like that. Do they operate under a different set of guidelines?
Yes, they do.
Okay, of course they do.
So actually it's nicer for you because you have more flexibility. There's only 3 requirements, and all of this is up to you as far as anything else. The state and the cities and counties are under a much stricter guidelines, and it's a rank order of priorities. So they have a list, and they have to make sure they do this and then make sure they do that. And so a lot of the districts they created are not are kind of bizarrely shaped because they prioritize. Often it's where a racial minority is concentrated. They prioritize that over and against issues of compactness and communities of interest. There is, in your case, you still are under the Federal Voting Rights Act. So, but I don't think that. There are ways to satisfy the Federal Voting Rights Act while not I think in your district it would not result in any bizarrely shaped trustee areas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that probably one of the things that we will, because I think there's going to be some I know Aaron and I live in a fairly generally close proximity, and I know Sally and Jamie do as well. So I think continuity of service or office would probably be probably high up on our list. And then I think we don't really see much future growth in Carpinteria, right? And visible boundaries is probably, we got the ocean and the mountains, right? And some creeks.
When there's rain.
So I think that, that from my perspective, I think that's, because as far as the communities of interest, I don't see renters. I don't know. I really, and for our community, I as I've probably expressed to you fairly clearly, I don't see how this benefits our community. So I think if we can divide it up so that we have the least amount of impact and the most amount of continuity, I think that's going to benefit our community the most, or be as least detrimental to our community.
What do you guys think about using the school, the Catalino, Aliso, Summerlin? No? 2 from each?
I wouldn't recommend that because you don't want, it's really important that as a trustee that you represent all of the schools. And what has happened in my experience is that when you have trustees that are representing a particular school, then sometimes that influences the work of the board. So I highly recommend, and our school boundaries are interesting. And then the other point I'd make is that many of our students don't even go to the school that they live in the boundary of, right?
Correct.
Now, it doesn't matter for middle school, high school, it's really elementary, but
Well, it used to be more clear when we had 3 elementary schools.
Yeah.
Or 4,
Yeah.
when we had Summerlin, Maine, Catalino, and Aliso. It's when Maine closed is when it got
Yeah.
convoluted.
Yeah. I mean, just from my experience, I've not seen a lot of success with that, but that's just.
Yeah, I'm just concerned if you end up with none representing one of the schools.
If you end up what?
If you end up with nobody living in one of those areas, or maybe you have 3 in one, and depending how they slice up the map, you could end up with 3 representatives who all their kids go to one school.
Well, the only exception, the one exception I would make for my comment is Summerlin. I really think you have to have a Summerlin, Toro Canyon. You know,
Probably all the
you
to
start
Night
at
Ever or
Summerlin and you
something.
count 3,600 people, right? And then that's your first.
Right.
From my perspective, that would be
Yeah.
my first.
That would make
First area,
sense, yes.
right?
Well, it's way out there anyway, so it's kind of.
I mean,
But I think you're right. I think we should use that as a check.
Right.
To make sure we don't
Not a
have,
requirement.
that we don't have 3 areas that are only Catalina.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think you will though, given our numbers. I don't think you're gonna have, 9,000, 10,000 people just in the Catalina, for Catalina.
Right.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I have
But I
a-
think we should use that as a check.
Yeah.
Well,
balance.
you're going to have, geographically, you're going to have probably 2 very big areas, 1 medium, and then 2 very small geographic
Yeah,
areas.
geographically.
But in order to get the population, I mean, I've kind of sketched up some ideas here on how I think it's going to divvy up, but I don't know what the I'm estimating based on my local knowledge, but
Do we have to have 5 separate areas, or can we do like 2 in one area and 3 in another?
Yeah, you had to have 5
5
separate. Yeah.
separate areas.
Yeah, 5 distinct trustee areas.
But we don't necessarily have to live in those distinct areas.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do.
You do.
You do. That's the
That's
issue.
the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's the whole point about the continuity, the issue, because right now we have 2 trustees that that are pretty close, and 2 other trustees that are pretty close. So we'll ask them to draw the maps so that you're all in different areas, because we want to continue
Right.
what we have. I mean, to start, look and see if that's possible, given the other point that you made. What was the earlier point? Oh, that was for the first one, respect voters' choices, and then you talked about, what was the other one that you said? Following visible boundaries?
yeah, if
Yeah.
we could, I mean,
Yeah.
really, I mean, we're talking roads, ocean, and county line, essentially.
Would you want me to follow the freeway as a boundary?
I don't think so, because the freeway divide no, I don't think the freeway,
No, it divides the whole town.
I
Doesn't
mean,
make sense.
Yeah.
that doesn't, yeah, I mean, the roads don't really
No.
create a whole lot of division in Carpinteria other than,
Or blocks.
real estate values. Yeah,
So what should he follow?
well, you're gonna have to follow roads, but I wouldn't use.
I mean, like, as far as
Well,
divide them by
so that's what I came up with.
neighborhoods, or by,
Which map are you
you
looking
just do
at?
this?
I just did, they're all the same, but I just did it like this. Something like that, where you're gonna have probably 2 areas that are, in downtown. You're gonna have Summerlin, and then you're gonna have an area that's got Conchaloma and Villa Del Mar and Casitas Village, and then somebody who's it would be in the rural area, Shepherd's Mesa, Casitas Pass, over, kind of wraps around behind Carpinteria.
Just,
Yeah, right.
yeah, by populations, kind of have to go like that, because we have the
Yeah.
2, the more dense areas, and then the
Right.
area
Yeah.
that's not, so.
I have a question about the census. So, our population's 18,000, but there's only 12,000 who are over 18 years old. That means there's 6,000 kids under 18.
Well, there may be a large number of non-citizens as well.
Okay,
Yeah, so that 12,158.
it's not by
is-
age, it's by
Well, it's by age
registered
first,
voters.
and then by those who are citizens.
Okay.
What's really interesting is that 70% of voters are white.
Right.
But what I also find is interesting, based on this, is you have for the total population, there's 196 non-Hispanic black people. And then for voting age population, we have 59 non-Hispanic black. That leaves about 140, I assume, are under voting age black kids. And that just doesn't jibe with the demographics of our schools at all.
But there's also private schools and
That's true.
go to other schools.
Does
and other areas.
do the kids at Kate,
Homeschool.
the kids at Kate, are they counted in the census as residents of this area?
They're not, no.
They're not?
They're claimed by their parents, wherever their parents live. Because they're dependents.
That just stood out to me. Just because it doesn't, it just did.
I know there's a lot of homeschool families, there's also a lot of families that go
Oh, I know, yeah.
out of area, out of district or private.
What really doesn't match is the adults and the students.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
75% of our students are Latino,
Yeah.
but 70% of the adults voting are white.
Well, there's a lot of there's a lot of older retirees in Carpinteria.
Well, that's,
And then there's a lot of probably undocumented families, and then the young kids, and then they end up moving away. Yeah,
Plus, there's a lot of white families that send their children to private schools.
yeah. Yeah, all right.
Would you like to speak to anything or anything I left out?
Why are you here? Why don't you just kind of give us a background on the Summerlin area? And it sounds like it might likely won't be an issue, but you want to give us some background on why we're losing-ish that trustee area?
Hi, Craig.
You're not so much losing as
board
gaining.
members.
Gaining.
Happy New Year.
To be with you
you're gonna
tonight.
get a bigger area.
I'm trying to read Andy's mask, and it's bugging me.
Iowa.
State.
Iowa State.
Okay.
Go Cyclones.
Okay. Got it, finally.
It was all wrinkled up under my nose.
I didn't want to forget one thing, and that is, since this is a public hearing, it would be important for the record to reflect that there were no public comments.
Does this count as a hearing?
Yes.
Pardon me?
This is,
Does, okay.
This is a public hearing.
It's on the agenda to open and close it.
we haven't
Okay.
hit that
Yeah,
yet.
We haven't,
done
we
that
haven't
yet.
started it yet.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
do that next.
You never know, in case questions
Thank you.
come up later. Okay, so the issue of Summerlin, and Jamie also made a comment about we already have trustee areas, and Daniel said it's a hybrid, and that's correct. But actually, we don't have trustee areas as such for Summerlin, because as you all know, there's not a separate geographical area for the election of the Summerlin trustee. All of the voters in the district select someone who lives in Summerlin to be that trustee.
I think that's correct.
You
You
don't?
don't think it's correct?
No. Isn't it just Summerlin that vote for Summerlin?
No.
Not anymore.
But
It was many years ago.
It will be. It will be.
Might be.
It will be.
Well, I wasn't on the ballot, so I don't know who.
There's
where-
a seat specifically for
Summerlin,
Summerlin,
but
but
anybody-
everybody can vote
Right,
for
okay.
that, for whoever that ends up
Exactly.
being.
And so, when Daniel was here in August, we talked about there being, a legal issue. How do we just change a very old configuration? And so, I've looked into that considerably. I've gotten a number of the old registers and books from the county committee on school district organization that goes back to the formation of your district. And Diana or someone furnished me an old book, also going back to 1960, 1959. And so parsing through all that, very briefly, what was originally configured upon unification was one trustee area. It was called trustee area number 1 that covered the Summerlin area. And then trustee area number 2 covered what had been Carpinteria Union School District. In other words, every other place in the district. And I had always been curious how that somehow morphed into what I know you're used to, Jamie, and that is that although everybody in the district all votes without breaking it down into trustee areas, there has to be one candidate who lives in Summerlin selected to represent Summerlin. So in digging through, I came across, because I needed to ascertain and advise Diana and your board as to whether or not there were additional steps that needed to be taken rather than just wiping the slate clean. And so eventually I came across a legal opinion that was given many years ago to Bill Cerrone by Don Vickers, who is a longtime school lawyer in the county counsel's office. And at that time, there was a change proposed from what had originally been configured at the time of unification in 1960 to what we have now. And that is everybody votes, but there's got to be one person that represents the Summerlin area. And that Summerlin area has never been exactly defined, to my knowledge, but whether it has or hasn't is really beside the point. So there was a legal opinion back then, and so that change was made. And in thinking about it, as far as I'm concerned, having made that change, where we're now looking at a different system that was originally put in place at the time of unification, the further transition to trustee areas under the California Voting Rights Act, I think requires that we go forward under the provisions of the California Voting Rights Act. Put a different way, if the board was to say, no, we're going to have a separate trustee area covering Summerlin, given the nature of the population at the west end of the district and also the smaller population, say, west of Toro Canyon, you would not be meeting the criteria that are, listed on the principles that Daniel just went over you. It's got to be a larger area than that, and there has to be some other considerations taken into effect. So after looking at it for some time, I, spoke with Diana not too long ago and told her that I thought that as far as I was concerned, there was a green light to go ahead and do this redistricting pursuant to the resolution that you adopted in 2018. So a couple other comments. If I think Andy, at the beginning of your questions, I think you said something like, must we do this as opposed to may we do it?
Well, encourage versus require.
Yes.
That was the it just seems a little chicken of them to not say require to say encourage when they mean require. Especially if there's no alternate plan or alternate.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the law doesn't say require, but it's currently interpreted in such a way that if you look at it as a discretionary measure, you're just putting a target on your back.
Oh, I understand that, but so if there's no expectation that Santa Monica prevails at the Supreme Court, then yeah, we move forward with this plan. But if Santa Monica does prevail, does that change anything for the rest of the state?
Yes, I think it definitely could, depending on the outcome. But it's not necessarily whether Santa Monica prevails or not. Let me tell you why. First of all, the Court of Appeal ruled in favor of Santa Monica and against the people that were doing the suing. And then that case got accepted by the California Supreme Court. And the the key thing in the whole law is racially polarized voting. So if people here in Carpinteria who are Latinx vote in a different way than people who are not Latinx, and no matter what election we're looking at, then anybody can call that racially polarized voting. The Attorney General of California, about 6 months ago, wrote a brief to the California Supreme Court in which he said, we're not coming down saying one side should win and the other side should lose, or vice versa. Instead, we believe that in its ultimate ruling that the Supreme Court should put down clarification and rules that don't simply look at racially polarized voting. In other words, there ought to be some accounting for whether or not, when districts are broken up into trustee areas, there is some degree of likelihood that it's going to actually make a difference in the extent to which the minority population influences the outcome of elections. And they also allowed, in their estimation, for looking at the actual status quo of governing boards and the history of those governing boards. So according to the Attorney General, it shouldn't just be, they were basically saying,
Well, he's agreeing.
it shouldn't be the way it is now.
He's agreeing it's a very poorly written law.
Yes.
That should never have been made, and that the interpretation of it has been taken advantage of.
That's correct.
Yeah, so.
But whether or not the California Supreme Court does anything about that, you know, it remains to be seen. And I keep looking, and as you know, it can take them forever to come down with a ruling. So at least at this point, I don't think it's anything that can safely be counted on.
No.
And I was going to say that I thought Daniel's excellent presentation outlined various principles that are have been recognized as being appropriate for consideration, but I think quite obviously none of those principles are finite tests. You know, it's subjective. These are the considerations that should be taken into account to varying extent, depending on, ultimately, on your discretion, looking at those various factors. And so, although Daniel is going to be drawing draft maps, not for next time, because you have one more public hearing that's just to get input. Really, it's from the voters. This isn't, in theory, about getting a reaction from the board members, but I think it's very valuable for you to be talking about it and to hear from Daniel about what your questions and issues are. So you'll have one more public hearing like this, and then he will come back at the following public hearing with draft map or maps giving you alternative scenarios. And then there'll be one hearing after that where there will be further discussion of those maps with any adjustments that are made. But the point of my going back over that is to say that your board are the folks who know Carpinteria and Summerlin best. And I think rather than, you know, looking at highways or school attendance trustee areas and so forth and so on, I think your ideas and the input that you provide to Daniel can be and should be very, very influential, because there are criteria that need to be met in terms of population, in terms of not having some particular negative impact on ethnic groups, meaning in our case Latinx. But I think you should be invited to provide your input. And it's hard to do that, as was mentioned, without some sort of an actual map to start drawing lines on. And I know, Andy, you said you have something, and there's certainly, you know, it'd be appropriate to make a copy of that, give it to Diana, and have her furnish that. Obviously, your board can't be deliberating this thing outside of a notice meeting. But particularly, well, I think Diana will be receiving very preliminary draft maps before we have the first mapping hearing. And there'll be an opportunity at that time to suggest potential adjustments by moving a line here and doing this, perhaps taking into account the incumbency issues that you were alluding to, which is appropriate and which is important. So I say that the board should have as much input as it feels it wants to, obviously looking at considerations that are appropriate and valid under the law.
All right, thank you,
Thanks,
Craig.
thanks, Craig.
I have another question for you, Daniel. For the population density, which is in the central area, which is mostly our Latino community, that's also the area that doesn't have a lot of voters, most likely. How does that look? Will there just be a few voters in that area? Can we divide it by voter region? Do we have any kind of knowledge of that?
Voter demographic,
Yeah.
voter location.
Voter location, because it's probably not right there.
Yeah. So ultimately, population is how you divide these areas. And so if we want to respect the Latino community who are more likely to be non-voters, it's likely that that area would, in order to be equal population and to keep that area undivided, they would have fewer voters. But those voters who do have the ability to vote will have the enhanced opportunity to elect candidates of their choice, and which is in accordance with the Federal Voting Rights Act.
Daniel, if you don't mind, it's CVA that counts when you're actually breaking down the trustee areas into approximately 3,600 people each, right? Citizen voting age population is key under CVRA.
Yes, under the Federal Voting Rights Act, we want to look at the citizen voting age population, which is what those colors are showing, and what these statistics are showing. And so we will be looking at that statistics to see if we can get an area where the Hispanic population, that citizen voting age population, is maximized without doing anything that would be considered racial gerrymandering, where you make funny looking lines to capture all the Hispanics that you can possibly capture. We would want to avoid that, but as long as it's a fairly compact, sensible looking area, we would want to do everything we can to respect that group.
Cool. Is there any other questions for Daniel? Or do you have questions for us? Did we even help you at all? Or just ask for?
Would it be possible for us to draw ours and submit them to you? Like our suggestions, and submit them to you? Like, I know you have the interactive map. Is there a way to save it on there, or would we need to screenshot it or physically draw something and then send it to you? And how would the public participate? Or is the public, I mean, I'm assuming the public.
That's the
is
hearings we
That's
have
the
with our map.
hearings, but like, are they able to say, this is how we want to see the map?
Yes.
And, okay, so is there gonna be an opportunity for like a large map for people to actually draw on, or?
It's interactive on the web.
Yeah, but
It'll be on the
can that be,
website,
can you submit from that?
That would be a public mapping tool, which is more expensive
Okay.
and is usually only.
We don't have that, so like,
yeah.
there's no way for, so unless somebody like screenshotted what they did and then sent it in?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so members of the public and members of the
Yeah.
board are more than welcome to make a drawing and email it, scan it, and send it, and I can do my best to replicate that drawing while keeping to the population requirements. But you might just have to make your best guess and you know the area well. You know which areas are more densely populated than others, and so yeah, well, I'll do my best to replicate it if you should send that.
Really, thanks.
Possibly an article in the Coastal View our local newspaper, a fairly thorough article that could go in the Coastal View to explain to people what's happening.
I did just think of
Well, they're doing it for the city too. The
Yeah.
city's doing the exact same thing we are.
That is true, yes.
I did just think of an option, and I don't know if this is still available, but the county had a redistricting, and there was a public mapping tool made available on their website. And so what you could do is go and access that, and try to, rather than draw on the whole county, just focus in on where the district is, and draw five areas that way. So you're more than welcome to go. I believe it's drawsantabarbacounty.org, and see if you can use that tool on just your district, and that will give you the population numbers as you draw. And once you do that, you can take a screenshot, or I believe you can even there's a link to the map that you make. So you can try that out and see if it works. Actually, when I come back in 2 weeks, you can tell me if that works, and hopefully that will be useful.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you, Daniel. We'll
Thank
see
you. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, we're gonna move on to item D5, this is the public hearing. This is the first public hearing on the district's transition to trustee area elections redistricting. I will open the hearing. We have no speakers this evening regarding this item, so I will close the meeting again. In addition, we have no public comment on anything not on the agenda tonight, so we'll move right along to our board policies, starting with E1, Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 5141.4, Child Abuse Prevention and Reporting. This is the first reading. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Item F1 is our warrants. The board is asked to approve the warrants for the period of December 10th, 2021 through January 6th, 2022 in the amount of $737,905.75. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item F2A, we are being asked to accept a donation from La Cintra Summerlin Foundation through Carpentry Education Foundation in the amount of $10,000 to the CUSD for an after-school robotics program at CMS and CHS. May I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve with thanks to La Centra Summerlin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item G1 is in our Measure U area is a replacement of fencing from the fence factory at Aliso School in the amount of $13,612 to be paid with Measure U funds. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
Second?
Any questions on that item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
G2, the board is asked to approve the contract with Kruger, Benson, Zemer Architects Incorporated. The proposal is for services and design of the new CHS administrative building. These are additional charges for changes made to the plan design as outlined in the proposal. The funding services proposal in the sum of $6,000 to be paid with Measure U funds. Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
And a second.
Second?
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item G3, the board is asked to approve a contract with Earth Systems for geotechnical engineering, observation, and testing during construction at Summerlin School. The scope of work will include, but is not limited to observation and testing during grading, including laboratory testing, compaction testing, project management, as related to the proposal. The total estimated contract cost is $40,300 to be paid with Measure U funds. Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
I have a question.
Andy has a question. Go ahead.
So, this isn't I remember we passed a contract with Pacific Materials for Summerland earlier, last year, and I thought it covered all of the geotechnical work for the foundations.
This is for post-construction. This is for the excavation and the testing as we're building. Everything was in the plan, all of the Pacific Lab materials, and we also approved a previous contract with Earth Systems for like $15,000, and that was all for the pre-construction testing that we were doing on the the lime treatment and the soil replacement and all of the drilling.
So in the background, I'm reading the proposal. So in the background, it said it covered compaction and lab test during grading. So this, I think that language in our background info is the same language that we used in the first one. That's why I was confused.
Oh, you know what? I didn't notice that.
And but if you, I just went to the proposal itself, and it is. So it's for building construction.
Yeah, it's during construction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
H1 is our personnel summary. The board is asked to approve the following recommended personnel items. We have 4 assignments, 3 resignations, 6 extended coaching season assignments, 2 co-curricular assignment changes, and 1 change of assignment. Make a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And last, we have our board announcements. Anything going on with you guys?
So tomorrow, tomorrow from 4 to 5 is a food bank at Carpinteria Children's Project. So it'll be tomorrow, January 12th and February 9th. And I hear that they're going to have some really awesome turkeys that they're handing out, a limited supply. So if you'd like to also get a turkey while you're getting your food bank, that's available. And then also on January 17th is the Martin Luther King Junior Foundation's celebration for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I believe it will be live streamed. They originally planned for it to be an in-person event. That's when they announced the students that won the poetry contest and things like that. So there's a good chance it may be remote, but it is coming up.
Anything else?
I just wanted to thank the superintendent and her leadership team, as well as the teachers and the staff that are at all the schools, working so diligently to keep our kids in school. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Monica, our board calendar. I know we have something coming up next week.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
We are going to be having a special board meeting closed session that will be via Zoom on January 18, and it will be at 5:30. And the link will be sent later to you. And then on January 31st, this is for the city council meeting with the two board members that are representing. It's going to be on January 31st at 1:30, and it's also going to be via Zoom. So if you can just put it in your calendar.
Okay. All right. That is tonight's meeting. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.